Hello and welcome to Church at Home with Rachael for Thursday, the 1st of June. Just kidding, it's the 25th of June or May. I'm sorry about this earlier this week. It's been one of those weeks. I was just completely discombobulated when I recorded Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So I think I'm back on track. I believe it's the 25th of May, I think. If it's not, oh well, it's today, whenever you're watching this. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about grief. Not to be depressing, but just to have some honest conversation about that. Earlier this week on Tuesday, I had the privilege of celebrating the life of the husband of a parishioner of mine, and it wasn't a funeral per se, more of a memorial service, but it was in church, and she is a regular attender and very, very faithful, believing Christian, and her husband, wasn't sure what he believed, and that they had a happy symbiosis in their relationship. And so it was a call, like as a priest, how do you do that? I've done lots of funerals for people I've never met, but whose families all, professed me how undyingly faithful they were to Jesus and all those things. And I think probably what was happening was they felt like they needed to convince the priest that mom or dad or aunt so-and-so or whoever it was a faithful Christian, so I would say yes to doing the funeral. The fact is, I don't say no. It's not my role to be the gatekeeper. I do not believe that. I've said that before, and I really don't think it is. I think it's my role to be a door opener. And if someone comes to me and says, we need someone to walk us through this difficult time, 99% of the time I'm going to say yes. And if I don't, there's either a really serious issue with something's going on that I really can't, or I'm just not able to be there. I'm going to be away or something like that. And so it was an absolute privilege for me to be able to be there for this person and for her family as they remembered her husband, who I did know, and he was a beautiful, beautiful man. And it was my pleasure to see him with his wife. But one of the things that happened was because I was trying to do this, recognizing, thanks to all of you and your comments for the last couple of weeks, really coming to terms with a sense of recognizing what it is to be a Christian, what it is to be a priest, in a world where the church, big C, little c, I'm not sure, doesn't have a great reputation. And for some people, it is the foundation, the core of their existence. And for a lot of other people, it absolutely isn't. And how do we find that balance? How am I as a priest, as a Christian, called to serve, recognizing these polarities that seem to exist in our society and find integrity and balance in that? And ever since this gentleman died, and I had the first conversation with his family about how do we have a liturgy, how do we have a church service that isn't preachy, that doesn't have too much religious stuff in it, because that wouldn't make him comfortable, but enough that would bring comfort and peace to the family members who are faithful Christians. And since then, like after that conversation, it seemed like, that God was pulling everything together, because comments on the YouTube channel, things were really calling me to think and process and pray about what is it that I'm called to do, and who am I called to, what am I called to preach? And one of the things that came to me, and it was very, very clear to me, and I mentioned it in my sermon at the memorial service, was the role of grief, and the path we take. I believe that we are walking along a long path of life, and this long path of life, it sometimes is very narrow, but quite often it's really quite wide. And there are many people, many companions who walk along the path with us. Sometimes we might feel like we're walking alone. Other times we know that we're walking alone, but quite often, if we look up and look around, we notice that there are so many others on the path. Family, friends, co-workers, excuse me, people who have joined us. But there are also those aspects of our lives that join us that aren't people, living, breathing, flesh adorned skeletons walking that path with us. Often there are emotions and there are experiences and other things. And one of the things that occurred to me as I was writing that sermon was that grief is one of the companions along our journey. And that when someone dies in our life, or something happens to us, or our pet dude dies, or we lose our job, or something, maybe our relationships are falling apart, we feel grief. And for a while, that grief becomes a companion on our journey. Now, we can try to push that companion away and say, I don't want to deal with you. You're awful. You make me uncomfortable. We can try to push that grief away, but what happens? Probably what will happen, maybe for a little while, for a few short moments, we think we have pushed grief off the path. We don't have to deal with grief. But lo and behold, we will find that grief kind of sneaks back up on us, or just jumps right in front of us and stops us in our tracks. And then I think it's healthy for us to recognize that grief needs to become a companion. Not something we run away from, not something that we try to block out or forbid from entering our lives, but something that we have to just, I'm not going to say get comfortable with, but something we have to be aware of, and something we just have to become companions with. I don't think a companion is necessarily somebody that is your, the love of your life, that you have to really get along all the time. Your companion on a train could simply be the person who bought the ticket in the seat next to yours, and you're cheek to jowl with them for forever long as you're there. You can choose to completely ignore them and hate the fact that they're present, or you can strike up a conversation, find out where they're from, where they're going, and then after a while, settle into that gentle place of, you read your book, they work on their computer, and when the time comes to leave, you both smile and say, have a great trip. Companionship can be what we make of it. And I think that grief is a significant part of our life's journey, along the walk we take along our path. But there's something else that I mentioned in my sermon I think is really important as well, is that while we acknowledge and we accept and we get used to that sense that grief is a companion along the journey, the longer we walk with grief, the more comfortable, the more used to our companion of grief we get, the sooner and the better able we will be to recognize that hope and joy also join us on the path. They also become companions. They don't come in and push out grief. They don't come in and say, okay, we're here now, you don't have to be here, and kick grief off the path. It's not like that. It's more like grief maybe is coming along with us, but maybe kicking stones, slowing down a little bit. It doesn't mean that grief is gone, but grief is maybe tagging along behind us. And sometimes when hope and joy join us on the path, they help us pick up our pace a little bit, help us feel a bit better. And then we get tired and we might slow down and we might find that grief catches up with us again. And hope and joy might have sort of moved faster and they're ahead of us, but we can still see them on the path. They are still companions on the journey. And once they have joined us, they will never leave us. That grief that we feel of the loss of a spouse or a child or our pet, the grief that we feel over the loss of a friendship or a job or something that's been very, very important to us, that grief will never leave. It'll always be a part of who we are. It may not be as present. It may not be as looming as time goes on, as we recognize that hope and joy enter into onto our journey with us along the path. And as they do, they don't eclipse grief, but they help grief to find a gentle cadence of walking, a gentle rhythm that maybe falls a little bit behind us, but is always with us. And that's beautiful. We don't need to feel hope and joy 100% of the time, nor do we need to feel grief 100% of the time. And so I often say to people when they're grieving, don't allow yourselves to get bogged down in grief. Allow yourselves to feel joy, because there's so many times when someone has died or you're grieving someone or something that you have those moments of absolutely you're crying tears and you're aching and you're maybe uttering groans, that those things that there are no words for how you feel. But there will also be times when all of a sudden you'll burst out laughing. You'll remember something funny, or you'll recognize something that was important to the person you've loved. And all of a sudden you find yourself laughing. And sometimes we feel guilty because we've laughed in the time of sorrow. That's okay. That's the hope and joy starting to come in and say, hey, can we join you on your journey? We won't overwhelm you. We just want to check in and see how you're doing. We're going to walk ahead of you for a little while, but when you're ready, catch up with us. Grief is a companion on our journey, but so are hope and joy. And they will always be there at different places. And sometimes they may even come together and walk arm in arm with us, four abreast along that path. The path is wide enough for us all. Wherever you are in your journey along your path, whether you are experiencing a season of great hope and joy, or you're experiencing a season of great and profound grief, or you're someplace in the middle, don't ignore your companions on the journey, but give thanks for them, because each and every one of them will bring you something that you need, something that your heart is yearning for. Allow yourself to walk with them, to converse with them, to be silent with them, and just be. And you might find that the path that you walk, the journey you're taking, isn't quite as lonely as you might have once thought. Have a great day. God bless, and I'll see you again tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachael on the 26th of May, not the 2nd of June. God bless you all.